For those of you not familiar with Jeff's background, he's currently a general partner at Flybridge Partners, Flybridge Capital Partners here. He was a founding member of the UPromise team on the management team for Open Market. He's a lecturer at the Harvard Business School. He's wrote a book called Mastering the VC Game. Highly recommend it. I didn't know a thing about VC before I read this. It sort of opens your eyes. It's a very easy book to read to sort of understand how this whole world of venture capital works. He's also, unlike a lot of VCs, he's got a computer science degree from Harvard and also an MBA from Harvard. So really thoughtful guy. I want to introduce Jeff, who's going to lead us. There may be some cold calling, I hear. So for those of you in business school.
All right, thanks, Jeremy. Thank you. Thanks, man. Okay, so I have a confession to make I have to start with, which is I'm about to do something I've never done before. I've talked in front of audiences before, I've taught a class before, but I've never tried to teach a case study to hundreds and hundreds of people many of whom have no idea at all about the case that I'm going to try to teach. And I'm going to try to do all of that in 45 minutes. So I'm going to need your help. So the way it works is I'm going to have two friends with mics. I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to ask you to participate by raising your hand, just like in the classroom. Many of you took your kids back to school like I did this week. So it's back to school for you. Raise your hand, try to call on you, get you the mic, and get you to participate. So that's going to be what we're going to try to do. So every good case is a narrative or a story. So I'm going to give you a little bit of context for the story. And then I'm going to frame a couple decisions that this particular company and this particular entrepreneur need to make. And then we'll talk about it, analyze them, and then come back and see if we can draw some lessons from it. So quickly, let me just tell you what an HBS case is. Jeremy gave my background briefly. Day job, I'm a VC. As he said, I used to be an entrepreneur, and I teach a class called Launching Tech Ventures. This case I've just written. It's now still in draft form, almost done with it, to teach this winter in the class. So it's a hot off the presses case. Full disclosure, the company Mattermark, I'm an investor in. Flybridge Capital, my firm is an investor in. Full disclosure, I did not invest in HubSpot. So that was clearly a big mistake. And up in the upper right-hand corner there is not one of my 3 kids that I took to school this week, but that's my dog, Leo. And I have no idea why I put him there, but I did. Okay, so here's the case method. So at HBS, the way it works is there are no lectures. You sit in the classroom, and it's all discussion-based. The professor is not the sage on the stage. The professor is the orchestrator, like a conductor in an orchestra. So you're just facilitating a conversation. And the dialogue is focused around putting you in the shoes of the protagonist. It's just like in a movie. There's a protagonist who has a dilemma, who faces obstacles. You go into that protagonist's mindset, try to understand what those obstacles are, and then make some decisions. And you do it on imperfect data. Now, typically, you would be assigned the case to read in advance. It would be 15 pages, charts and graphs, a lot of data. You'd do some research on the web. Today, we're going to totally make it up as we go along. I'm going to try to give you the facts about the company very quickly, and then we're going to have some discussion based on imperfect information. And I'm going to ask you to put yourself in the mindset of the entrepreneur, in the mindset of the CEO and founder of this company, Mattermark. Just out of curiosity, how many of you have heard of or know Mattermark? Okay, so about 25%. So I might lean on those of you who know a little bit about the company to help with the case discussion. All right, sound good? Here we go. Before I introduce Danielle, the founder and CEO, I should just have a little caveat. At HBS a couple years ago, the dean did an analysis of cases and did a gender analysis and discovered that the percent of HBS cases with a female protagonist was 10%, and set a goal in the next few years to achieve 20%. In my class, we're at 60-40 this year. That is 60% female protagonists in the cases. So a lot of the cases I try to teach are about women entrepreneurs driving tech companies. Danielle is one of them. She's an extraordinary entrepreneur. She was a community college dropout, no technical background or training, self-taught hacker, blogger, entrepreneur. She stumbled into a very small company at the time called Twilio, ended up running marketing for Twilio. Twilio ended up becoming a big and important and exciting company, and she had an amazing education over 3 years there. And then she left to start a new company called Referly. She got into the Y Combinator program, for those of you who know that famous accelerator program in the Valley, and totally failed. She shut the company down, couldn't make the value proposition work, and was sitting around with her co-founder, who was her husband, who's the CTO of the company, and another co-founder, the COO, and they went off on a little retreat and they said, what are we going to do? We are totally screwed. We are out of money, we're out of ideas, we got nothing. She started blogging. She's a prolific blogger. And that's how she came up with this idea, pivot to Mattermark, because she started blogging about private companies and venture capital, which she was obsessed with. And she discovered that there's not a lot of good information available about private companies. If you want to learn about a public company, you go on the internet, you go to your Bloomberg terminal, you search through the ticker tape and read the public quarterly reports that these companies provide. You can get a huge amount of data, revenue, sales, ups and downs about public companies. Private companies, nothing. HubSpot was very unusual when they were first started. They would post their annual report, even as a private company, talk about revenue, talk about margin, things of that nature. Most private companies do not do that. So Mattermark started collecting data on private companies and creating these dashboards. And they created dashboards based on venture capital firms, dashboards based on industry sector, dashboards based on geography, and really started to get a very interesting data set that was initially very attractive to venture capitalists. And that's where our story begins. So here's the dilemma. Every HBS case begins with a dilemma and a decision that has to get made. And I'm going to give you a little bit of data, and then we're going to try to have the conversation as if you were Danielle and her team trying to figure this out. So she raised a $2 million seed round in the summer of 2014. After the pivot, shipped the product. First customers were venture capital firms. That's how we became an investor. I was reading her blog. My partners were reading her blog, reading her Twitter stream, really impressed with her insights. When she came up with these reports, we started to get them for free. And then another venture capitalist said, Danielle, you should be charging me for this. This is criminal. And so she started building a data set and started to charge. So that was what happened in the seed round. At the end of 2014, she started to get a little momentum, built the team a little further, built the product a little more robustly, and raised a Series A financing of $6.5 million. Classic pattern for a startup. A little bit of seed money, prove out some things, get the product up and running, and then raise a Series A and go to town. So, by the way, I'm sorry about that. For whatever reason, this is forwarding on its own, but we'll run with it. So she raises the Series A, and now here's where things begin. She has a board meeting. It's January 2015. You're Danielle. You have a board meeting, first board meeting with your Series A investor who has just written you a $6.5 million check to do what? And that's what you have to present to the board. What are you going to do with the money? Sorry, this really has a mind of its own. So she has two options. Option one is pour more money into sales and marketing to ramp up the VC market. So her first customers were VCs. Why not sell to more VCs, invest in sales and marketing, and build out the VC product and the VC market? Option two is to invest more in the product and begin to broaden her market. So let's begin with the question. I love this quote, by the way, from Samuel Johnson. Many of you know this about deadlines. Nothing focuses the mind like a hanging the next morning. When you're an entrepreneur, for those of you who are entrepreneurs, and you have to walk into a board meeting after having just $6.5 million wired into your bank account, you are very, very focused. So if you're Danielle, what would you do? And obviously, you don't have enough data, so feel free to have conversation, make comments about what more you would need to know. So let's begin. Class, what would you do? And the way we're going to raise hands, I'm going to call on you, and my trusted teammate is going to hand you the mic.
Okay.
Should be on.
Yeah. Okay. So she had trouble. Well, she fired her head of sales.
How do you know that?
Well, because I read some data that was made available.
Cool.
To all of us.
We're going to get to that. Good. Yes. Oh, yeah. The brief.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
she
read the
hired head of
brief.
sales.
Okay.
Perfect.
So she fired her head of
You
sales.
did your homework.
I did my homework.
You are. You're the
Fired
best.
her head of sales.
Thank you. You're the awesome.
welcome.
You rock.
So that and he came from a competitor. So that tells me that if he wasn't able to sell the product, I would ask why. Right? He had experience. What happened there? So now she's stuck with a sales team with no leader and no direction. So my thought is, and we know that the product should expand beyond the VC market because the VC market is narrow.
How do you know the VC market is narrow?
Part of it is the case data, but part of it is that you've got a whole bunch of other people that are interested in this data. So I'm kind of looking at this as like the Gartner group for information.
Yeah.
And the same type of subscription service.
Which has a broad, many
Right.
of you probably subscribe to Forrester or Gartner and
Right.
pay them to say nice things about your company.
So my thought is that that's kind of the model in a way for private companies, and
Yeah.
you've got competitors like Hoover's, and so part of her challenge is going to be to figure out how do I carve this out in such a way where I'm competing with the big guys out there, but I'm creating enough hooks in it
Yeah.
to be appealing.
Tell me your name.
Catherine.
Okay, so Catherine is positing that sales is a bit of a mess and could be a product issue, could be a sales execution issue, we don't know. And VC market is narrow. And therefore what, Catherine? What's the decision you would make if you were Danielle in terms of what you would do on this particular question?
I feel like it's not an either or. I feel like could be a combination of both.
Okay. So you would both pour sales money into sales, you split the money, some
Well,
into sales and marketing to ramp up
Here's
sales
what I want to
aggressively,
do.
and some
Okay.
into product.
If I'm Danielle, I really want this product / service, SaaS, to appeal to a broader market.
Right.
I want to get that dialed in, and then I want to be able to go out there and sell it to the target industries that I'm going to go after.
Right.
And I could use inbound marketing to help me do that.
Right. Okay. That was a good suck-up comment. I appreciate suck-up comments, as I'm sure HubSpot does. Okay, let's go over here. Where's Annalena? Annalena, why don't we try over here? I'll go back and forth and try to cover the room. By the way, at HBS, they actually give you a report at the end of class which analyzes your call pattern. This is how, talk about big data meets education. I literally get a report that says, how many did you call on the left, the center, or the right? How many international students, US students, men, women, by row, everything. Okay.
So my name is Josh, and I am an entrepreneur, actually dealing with a relatively similar problem. But in this particular case, I think, and I also had the benefit of just glancing quickly at some of the information. And so one thing that really jumped out to me was the fact that that head of sales was hired in, let's call it September, and by December he was already gone. And so
Right.
if I think about what I would anticipate the sales cycle for a VC type of sale being, I would guess that maybe it's a little bit longer than 3 months. And so maybe let's hypothesize that for a second it was potentially an execution issue. But for me,
And with the execution, are you saying maybe it was execution by the head of sales who didn't work out, or execution by Danielle, who, by the way, by way of background, has she any sales experience? None. Has she any management of sales experience? None. So whose execution problem was it?
It could have easily been a combination of both, right? It's really hard to learn sales if you're a first-time founder. Even for an experienced salesperson, though, depending on it, sometimes you just don't have the right fit. It doesn't mesh well. Maybe there were issues coming over from a competitor, what have you. But I think for me, the biggest concern I would have is leaving the niche that I've started to prove out too early. And so if I was a board member,
Yeah.
I would say, well, I just wired in the past 6 months, I've sent you $8.5 million because you've been able to prove to me, probably to raise a Series A, you've theoretically had some data that suggests this VC market is robust. And there are probably thousands of VC firms out there. So I don't believe that you've really necessarily gone out and prospected in all those. And so the question is, what data do you have to suggest that it's really worth sort of dropping your focus there and expanding into this new market where, again, there are probably lots of new potential prospects, but they may have different considerations for products and how you sell to them. And what data do you have to tell me that you're going to be really good at doing this, and this VC market you're sort of leaving on the back burner?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're an investor, and I've been in this situation a lot, entrepreneur comes in and says, hey, this thing we're working on, this market, it's not working really well, but there's this bright, shiny object over here. That's going to be awesome. All we need to do is put some more money, more effort, new product features, and we'll get that beautiful, shiny object over here. Anything else you wanted to add?
No, that was it.
Awesome. OK, let's go in the back. Kate, can you hit that person up there in the back? And then I'm going to give you a little bit. We'll have this comment, and then I want to share a little data, because this question of how big is the VC market, how valuable is it, these are central questions that need to be answered as you make this decision.
I have an MBA from another Ivy League institution where we don't do the case study stuff, so thanks for hosting this. I'm also now an entrepreneur in similar situation. It seems to me that the VC market is big enough and wealthy enough to support a very profitable, premium-priced product, and that the entrance into this market is relatively straightforward. So I would suggest really focusing and owning that space, cash flowing it, become the brand. I don't know if people have heard of Michael Bloomberg, but there's a wealth of information out there and people pay premiums for it.
That's great. OK, so let's give a little. I love that comment, and because it's helping me frame this question. Some of you are asking, how big is the VC market? By the way, this is going to be, like many case discussions, non-linear. Don't be disturbed if I fly back and forth on slides. Because in a case discussion, you have to prepare for 10 different outcomes, 20 different outcomes, depending on where you want to take the dialogue. But you're saying, VC market's pretty big. Let's make some hay in the VC market. The product, the sales strategy, let's focus there. So how big is the VC market? So just a little bit of data for those of you who don't do this for a living. There are about 500 active VCs in the US. The product is now, at this point in time, roughly garnering $20,000 a year in SaaS revenue. So that's the average selling price, or ASP, that the company is able to achieve. So the whole market is somewhere on the order of $100 million. And if you think you can get 20% market share, maybe 30% market share, you're looking at a $20 to $30 million a year annual recurring revenue SaaS business. So is that attractive enough to go after it now? Is that a toehold you're excited to pursue?
Yeah, with $6.5 million in raise, that's something that I would love to own and use some of that cash flow to then fund other product development and so on.
Yeah. I mean, look, there are other benefits, right, to this. I mean, it's a small market, but if you can own it, it could be very valuable. Anybody want to comment on that? By the way, the best dialogue is when you disagree, so feel free to not be nice. None of you know each other, by and large, so you can be rude to each other without much fear of retribution. Not that I want you to be rude, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, you got rude. No. Yeah, it's just fascinating. Thanks for doing this. It's very enjoyable. Should I stand up, by the way?
Whatever you want.
Oh, okay. I love your comment, and it's the easy way, right? I've been in that situation before, and it's interesting because you have excitement when you first get wired, then you have fear the next morning. So the fear sets in, right? Making a mistake. That doesn't seem like a big enough market for me. If I'm a VC putting in 6.5, let's say that I only get 15 million of that. It's just not a big enough return on my investment. You know,
How do you know?
because of what VCs need.
Let's get into that for a minute.
Yeah.
Let's hit that data point. $20 million a year SaaS revenue business, what would that be worth, do you think?
As far as selling it, or as far as recurring revenue, or
Market value.
Market
What
value?
enterprise value do you create if you build a $20 million SaaS business?
Yeah, I mean, it's not an Uber, right? I mean, it's not, if that's the biggest, as big as the market is, it isn't infinitely scalable within that market. You'd have to go outside the market, which requires more R&D and more cash. Okay?
Yeah.
But if I'm a VC and I give you 6.5 and you're only going to give me back a $20 million business annually, even if it's recurring revenue and it's going to be a 10 times multiple, let's say, okay? And this is not Uber fantasy money. I mean, they're delivering information.
Something
they're delivering,
real.
It's a valid product. It's not, inflated pricing. It's a value-driven business.
Tell me your name again.
Garrett.
Garrett.
Carrara.
Okay, but Garrett, you just said 10 times multiple. Why?
Recurring revenue, depending who's doing the valuation. I mean, again, getting away from inflationary internet bubble
Yeah.
stuff. A 10 times revenue for recurring
Revenue, SaaS business. People who
It's
don't know, HubSpot is around 10 times revenue. This slide desperately wants me to show this slide, so now I will show this slide. The remote has a mind of its own, but just kind of pause you, Garrett, for a minute, just to give you a little bit of data. So there's this debate about, well, how valuable is that market? If it's 10 times, if it's 200 million or 300 million, take a $20 million business, $30 million business, multiply by 10, 2 to 300 million, you invest 8.5 million, 300 million comes out and gets split up. That's pretty good. I would take that investment any day. But how do you know it's 10 times revenue, which HubSpot is, by the way, in roughly in today's market price, or 2 times revenue? Well, these are the characteristics, just to kind of cut to the chase in the interest of time, that you would see to determine whether you're looking at a business that's super valuable, 10 times revenue, just every dollar you bring in, 10 times enterprise value, versus okay valuable, 2 times revenue. Services businesses can be 1-time revenue, so there's nothing to sneeze at, 2 times revenue. But if you've got a smallish market size versus a Mongo market size, if you've got a recurring business model versus a one-time business model, you're going to get different valuation multipliers. Growth rate, fast versus slower. Churn rate, which is a sign of whether companies, the customers, like what you're doing and keep doing it. And then if you have strong network effects versus weak network effects. So Garrett, what's Mattermark in the VC market in your judgment based on this?
What's it worth?
Yeah. Do you feel like it hits all 5 of these criteria for 10 times? Do you think these are the wrong criteria? What do you think?
Well, I think my first thought is
If all they came to you was said, I've got a business that has the entire VC market and has built a $20 million business.
so you're effectively able to get the market.
You get the market.
We're assuming that.
Yeah. Does that feel like a 10 times revenue business?
I'm looking at your churn rates. Hold on one second.
No, right? Doesn't hit all those criteria.
No.
That's a magical
No.
column. That column is like pixie dust. Okay?
Yeah, it's a fantasy internet market. I mean, it's a fantasy Uber type valuation.
Yeah, I mean, it's not fantasy because there are probably 35 SaaS companies that are achieving these multiples. You can criticize the public markets, whether they're accurate or not. We can have that whole debate in another time. But people are achieving that, but they're getting that. They have to hit those criteria. Just the VC market alone doesn't hit that criteria. Do you want to have a final comment? Or I want to move on to something else.
No, it's
You're
great.
good.
It's great.
Excellent. Thank you, Garrett. Okay, who wants to comment on the benefits of being in the VC market? Because there's a hint here I gave here. Are there other benefits to dominating the VC market? How about here? This is a plant, by the way, because I know her. Maybe it's a plant.
Hi. So a few things. One is that there's benefit to being in the VC market. Would be an opportunity to focus. So this organization is clearly, I would say, having 2 problems. One is that they may not have nailed the product right. So if you focus on a smaller market, you can keep your organization focused and nail the product. Once you've got that nailed, then it's easy to pivot to other things. You're looking at different features. You can take that and move it along. The other piece is that they kind of already have a foothold in that space. So you've got an opportunity to learn. You've got an opportunity to grow. And also, given that you clearly have a sales leadership problem, sort of taking this opportunity now to sort of pivot your market space and change your sales strategy. Too much change.
Bad time, too many things. How do you know if they've nailed the product? What would you look at if you were assigned the task, if you're an associate at a VC firm and your partner says, hey, go figure out, have they nailed the product? What data do you want to see? How do you know if they've achieved the magical, known in the industry as product market fit?
I mean, I would look at a few things. I would want to sort of speak to their customers and look at their customers, but I would look at sort of the, like, it's funny, I emailed my CFO to make sure that we've been billed for HubSpot, because in case you can't take it away from me, I would look at making sure their customers are standing in front of their product saying, do not take this away from me. And looking for that passion. I would be looking at their usage metrics. I would be looking at their report. Is this data critical to their customer's business? And if it is, they're doing something right. And if it's not, if they're going, well, it was good, it was valuable for this deal, but it's not valuable for everything, then they don't have it.
Not
right.
worth it. That's great. So she just rattled off a handful of criteria. Again, in the interest of time, I'm going to give you a couple of the answers here. These criteria help you determine whether you've achieved product market fit. And if you can nail these criteria or a reasonable subset of these criteria, you've crushed it. LTV versus CAC, that is the value of a customer versus the cost to acquire the customer, 3-to-1 ratio or better. Your monthly recurring revenue is growing 10% a month, month over month, yielding a compounding over doubling every year. Your churn is low, under 30%. Your net promoter score is solid, above 20. Sales team's hitting quota. Sales cycles are short. Usage of the product is high and growing. And what Sean Ellis refers to as the 40% test, which was great that you made this connection. If you took away the product, how many of your customers would be upset? If HubSpot were taken away from you all, how many of you would be upset? I don't mean to shill for HubSpot since I'm not an investor, as I told you before. Pissed off about that. But anyway, so that's, this product, Mattermark, is it hitting that test? And I'll just tell you the answer, if you were the analyst getting the board materials, looking through the deck, or the VC partner, this is what you would find. NPS is terrific, so that checks. For those of you who don't know NPS, by the way, I'm sure all of you know this, but just to remind you, you ask your customers, would you recommend this product to others? And you calculate what percent would give you a promotional thumbs up, 9 to 10 out of 10. I would recommend this to someone else, versus your detractors, the 1 out of 6, the meh versus the very negative. You subtract that out, you get your net promoter score. Many of you took flights to get here. This is the airlines. Net promoter scores last year, just as a little benchmark. So if Mattermark's at 50, it's as good as JetBlue, almost as good as Southwest, better than Virgin, and a hell of a lot better than Delta. Okay, so you see that. You see that data and you think that's encouraging. MRR is growing. Here's the MRR chart for the period June through the end of the year. Although the growth has been flat recently, and this is the new VP of Sales hiccup. This is the problem we've seen. Your LTV to CAC is meh. It's only about 1. But by the way, some really great companies seem to improve that over time. Here's HubSpot's LTV over CAC. From Q1 of 2011 was a little north of 1. Very shortly thereafter, they would improve it considerably because you're iterating over time, right? This is not a constant thing. And you're seeing a lot of churn right now, 50 to 60% churn. So you would argue what about product market fit? Maybe can you use this mic here just in the interest of time? Jump up, grab it. What would you say? And what would it lead you to conclude about this particular question?
Yeah, so first I had a question about, you said that the VCs were willing to pay 20 to 30 grand. Was that annually, monthly?
VCs are willing to pay, yes, as customers,
Yeah.
$20K annually.
20K annually. So the way that they're measuring MRR, would that be split across the year? So
Yes.
how many?
Couple $1,000 a month.
Yeah, so they're doing a couple $1,000. So, sorry, what was your? That was my question.
So,
and then what was yours?
so it looks like they haven't quite hit product market fit. There are a couple things that are okay, a couple things, many, like the sales efficiency and the churn rate that are kind of bad. So
yeah, so I would say like their churn is bad. Their usage is high. For these people that have signed up annually, like are they churning out monthly? Is that?
they're using it, but some are and some aren't.
Yeah.
So the question is, again, do you have a product problem? that you need to fix, or do you have a sales problem that you need to fix? Let me tell you a little bit. I know a lot of people want to get in, and I'm down to on time. I want to just get this comment because I want to put this out there, and then I want to get some more comments. So sales leadership's a mess. Okay? So up until now, that first $1 million of revenue, the founders have done the selling. That is classic, by the way. Many of you who are founders in this room know you have to do the selling yourself before you can teach others to sell. You have to get down the sales learning curve, as I'll talk about in a little bit. They hired the adult. Isn't this also classic? Young entrepreneurial team, raise venture capital money, and the adult shows up with the golden-plated resume, and he is a disaster a few months later. Cultural fit issues, executive functioning issue, who knows what, but didn't work out. The team's conclusion is it's not a product problem, therefore it was a sales execution problem. So now you have a sales team with no leader. What do? You have two choices, basically. Do you hire a new VP from the outside because, okay, the first one was bad, but hey, we all make hiring mistakes, or do you promote somebody from within? Phoebe. You have a mic for Phoebe? Right here for you. What would you do? This is a classic dilemma early stage entrepreneurs have when it comes to beginning to scale beyond founder selling.
Sure.
And what
So-
considerations would factor into your decision?
Sure. So we ironically we hired both people. We hired someone who worked out and someone who didn't simultaneously in similar roles. I would argue that the founders probably need to keep on being probably in the C-suite level and lead the company. And I would argue that you need to hire from outside, although obviously if they've seen hiring from the outside is a challenge. So I would say hire from the outside, be very careful to interview for fit, figure out exactly where you're going, align very well, but definitely hire from the outside, because I'd also argue if they had someone within their 5-person organization that was going to fit this role, then they would have stepped up and they would have already moved forward and done that.
So you know Einstein's definition of insanity.
Yes.
Why do you think hiring someone from the outside, yet again, is not insane? Why would you recommend that? It's the same thing you just did and it didn't work.
I would argue that they should not do the same thing that they just did. I don't think that the act of hiring someone from the outside is the exact same thing. I'm arguing that they do the same thing in a very different way than they did previously. So we
Hire the right person, be better about screening for fit, cultural fit.
Yeah. It's a very soft thing to do. Like there's no,
Yeah.
people put metrics outside hiring, but
Yeah.
it's definitely.
And classically, the CEO who just raised money wants to hire a big name from a big company with a big resume. We're still in like super scrappy sales mode, right? Right here, and you can use this mic.
For the product itself, as well as the sales leadership, I think they need to do some market validation with VCs that aren't customers yet. So who's going to be able to sell to these guys? There's also that cultural fit aspect to whoever's in sales leadership that we just talked about, where it does have to be someone who's scrappy, whether they're internal or external. They have to be able to operate with a blank sheet of paper, if you will, because there's nothing there for them to work with.
Yeah, there's a model, people know this model, the sales learning curve. If you haven't read this article in HBR, it's a terrific article by a former VP of sales from a very successful data communications company in the Valley. In those early days, you're doing things that don't scale, as Paul Graham famously said, head of Y Combinator. You're doing founder selling and you're over-investing in sales, and it's not going to work very well and it's not going to be very efficient. But the point is you're learning. The point isn't to maximize sales. The point is to maximize learning during this initial period. You learn, you iterate, you teach yourself how to sell, and then you can teach others how to sell. But how can you teach yourself how to sell? How can you teach others to sell if you don't yet yourself know how to sell? Comments from over here. Can we get a mic over here? So that, back to the question of what would you do?
So this really strikes a chord with me because I've experienced this multiple times within the startup industry, not as an entrepreneur, but actually
Working inside.
Working inside. And what I've seen time over time is that they, again, I think to appease the VCs, they hire.
It's always our fault.
Always.
Totally.
They hire these big names in the industry, and these are people who are generally coming from larger companies, and they think whatever worked is going to continue to work at the startup. And
Yeah.
I think what I've seen at startups again and again is that it's not so much about experience and credentials as much as it is about passion. I think that people in startups, the reason why some of them do well is because people understand the product from the beginning, they become passionate about it, and they can really sell it on an emotional level.
Yeah.
And so I think that promoting someone internally who understands that and has been there, and even if it entails additional training, but that training is going to be on the processy side and where they have the foundational emotional aspect of it. And I
Yeah.
think that you're much more likely to succeed. And if you look at one last thing is if you look
Yeah.
at technology industries and the startups, so many of these people are young. So many of the successful entrepreneurs and management are young people who have grown
Have that
into
passion,
the roles.
grow
and
in
you
and
see
learn.
it again and again and again.
Yeah. Okay, so you're wanting to discriminate against older professionals, is what I just heard
Absolutely.
you say in attacking this. Let me get an older professional here to respond. But as you're responding, that was a great comment. I'm just teasing you, but it was a terrific comment because you see it from the inside, right? The outsider comes in, they hack around, they come with their playbook. They didn't spend the time to learn the company's playbook and the particular situation at hand. Let's hear a quick comment, maybe a retort, and then I'll give you some consideration framework.
So we just went through this. We stepped on the rake of going out and getting a big name guy out of 3M. We're out of Minneapolis, and it did not work out. And after 1 year, we quickly made a change. Went back to the two principals, and then decided to flip the sales organization upside down. We took our creative director and put him in charge of sales, somebody who could immediately engage. And then we re-engineered the engagement process and got our people that could immediately engage with clients out front.
That's great.
And put the creative director in charge, and he's now our client chief engagement officer. So by redesigning the sales process, the engagement process, we didn't have to go out and get a big name. We were able to do it from internal.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that. I had a portfolio company do this exact thing this quarter where new VP of sales came in, didn't work out. I didn't recommend that person, to be clear. And they said, this isn't working. Let's promote from within, but not somebody from within the sales organization, but from the services organization who knew how to serve the clients. And look, sometimes there are reasons to bring in a new leader. If you're a little bit more mature, if you want to borrow someone else's playbook, you may lean towards that. If you want to provide more executive leadership, sometimes you've got a very young company and you want to have somebody who's just a good leader, who knows how to manage and who can help frame the culture. And sometimes you want somebody who can bring a team. It's not just they show up, but they show up with 3 of their best sales reps and 2 of their best regional managers and their head of international. That can be a very powerful instant team model. But at other times, the playbooks can be unique. The Mattermark playbook maybe is unique. Maybe it's not. Selling SaaS data analytics has some commonalities. Selling to VCs is relatively unique. It sends an amazing cultural signal to your staff. And importantly, as Phoebe highlighted, keeps the founders selling. Okay, the last dilemma that Danielle has, and then we'll do some decision making and voting, is what does she actually invest in? Now, this is a perfect conference and a perfect audience to ask this question, because if you conclude you want to invest in sales and marketing, if you're the CEO, it's not that easy. Now you have to decide, do I invest in sales or marketing? What kind of sales? Is it inside sales or outside sales? Do I hire a rep, or do I hire or do I invest more in marketing program dollars? Do I do content marketing? What am I actually investing in? And how do I know? So, with the beard, do you ramp up sales, ramp up marketing, and what do you want to know to make that decision?
So it depends on the maturity of the company. I believe they still haven't nailed product market fit. And
as the data showed, it's still
correct.
They're still figuring it out.
And so assuming that they've gone with an in-house promotion because faster ramp up, better feedback and quicker feedback cycle to the product team, and making the assumption that they raised money based on a bigger hypothesis than just the VC market, and it was a sort of a proving ground.
Yeah.
Outside sales, the whole Steve Blank get out the building is really what they need to be doing, but not in a sales or salesy kind of approach, but in a customer development or market development approach.
Fantastic language. How many of you have read Steve Blank's book, 4 Steps to the Epiphany? Okay, like no one. Holy cow. Okay, read that book. That was a really important reference to it, which is get out of the building, do customer development, invest in that, because the product doesn't fit. It's not working. People aren't sticking with the product. It's not easy to sell. We haven't achieved product market fit. We just concluded that, and therefore you say invest in...
Invest in sales, but don't call it sales.
But don't call it sales. Call it customer development, discovery. Invest in people who are not coin-operated salespeople, but invest in people who are more solutions-oriented, product-oriented, business development-oriented.
Correct.
Great. Okay. Does anybody disagree with that? You disagree with that. Come on up.
So I guess what I wanted to mention marketing a lot earlier, but since we're at Inbound.
You wouldn't happen to be in marketing.
Like most of these people
Yeah,
here?
right.
Yeah. So
Highly biased
I
audience,
didn't
I know.
Like the shameless self-promotion and be like, hey, what the hell about marketing? But what about investing in marketing that isn't just inbound or outbound, but really is very customer-centric, and that is thinking about not just how to sell more product, but how to make the product better? So product marketing is an integral part of marketing. It's not just got a word slapped on the front.
Right.
And have marketing get out of the building.
Right.
Have marketing talk
And
to
learn.
Learn about the users. So not just
Fantastic.
talk to users who aren't, or people in the right market
Who are buying.
who aren't using the product, but also talk to the users who have it open on their desk every
Yeah.
day. What makes it sticky? What makes them love it? How can you make it stickier? Can you get them to refer it to other VCs or
Yeah.
other users within their company? And then talk to the ones who aren't using it about what they don't like about it,
Yeah.
what kept them from it. Because maybe the product is good enough, but maybe the product isn't user-friendly when you first open it up.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not teaching you, maybe it's just
This
not
is great.
viral.
These are great points, because when you're in this early phase, everybody has to be in product management. Salespeople have to be in product management. Product marketing people have to be in product management. Marketing people, you have to be learning, and iterating. I'm going to give you one data point, and then we're going to make some decisions.
So the one thing I did want to mention too, is the VC market might not be super sexy enough to get 10x, but there's a couple of points that were on there that are very strong. The network effect of the VC market is insane.
Yeah.
So nail the VC
We are the
market.
biggest gossips.
Yeah, and
We're like
have
talking to
every
everybody.
VC wanting that data to be used by their startups.
Right.
Every single one.
Portfolio company access, exactly, great. Hey, look, when you're analyzing, is it a sales problem or do I have a marketing problem? You all know this. This is like preaching to literally the choir. You got to look at some of the data. Leads versus deals is one key data point. In this case, this is the real data. And by the way, Mattermark is so amazingly transparent. They were kind enough to share this is all their real data. So leads are ramping. Head of marketing's like, I am killing it. Deals, meh. What does sales do? Leads aren't really qualified. They're not good leads. They're just pumping up the numbers. What does marketing do? Sales isn't closing. They don't know what they're doing. That's why we fired the VP of sales, right? You guys know this dance. So they have that problem that they have to deal with, and they've got to figure it out. They've got to analyze the funnel. They've got to worry, are they in a training issue? Are they in a recruiting issue? Do you have the wrong salespeople? Are you training them wrong? Is it a product problem? Do you need to have everybody just focused on iterating the product? Or do we have a sales execution issue? And do we have a lead handoff problem? Okay, so now let's make some decisions. Let's make some choices. We're going to ask for a vote on each of these 3 questions. Those of you who think they should invest in expanding, invest in product to expand outside the VC market immediately, raise your hand, please. Invest immediately to expand outside the VC market. Almost no one, a handful of people. And how many of you think they should just really nail the VC market, nail product market fit, and grow in that market? Okay, very interesting. Excellent. Okay, how many of you think they should, as Phoebe said, hire smarter, get outside, and get a better new VP? Raise your hand. Okay, and how many of you think they should hire from within and just keep running sales with the head of the founders driving it? Okay, excellent. Also, a majority rules on that one. And then the last question, do you invest more in sales or marketing? How many think invest in more salespeople to get the feet on the street, to get the feedback directly on the product? And how many of you think they should invest more in leads, promotions, marketing programs? This is a wicked biased audience. Okay, so here's what they did. They decided to double down on VC and nail product market fit. They decided to promote from within a star salesperson, and they decided to be more aggressive in investing in sales and wait a little bit on the marketing. Some quick takeaways. You've got to align strategy with opportunity with financing. Decide what kind of a company you want to be, how big is that opportunity, and get the money that matches that. You've got to tightly measure product market fit and constantly earn it. They may have achieved product market fit in VC, but now they have to go to the next one and the next one and earn it over and over again. Sales and marketing alignment, this is, again, preaching to the choir. Looking at results, aligning activities, aligning incentives is critical. And something I warn my startups all the time, be careful about premature scaling. Don't scale until you nail product market fit. Many, many, many companies overinvest before they nail product market fit. And with that, you are now all Harvard MBAs for a fraction of the cost. Thank you very much. Thank you.